All right, so back here for the final video in this brief series of discussions on publishing and presenting your research in academic journals and conferences. This is the last one, and this one will address tips on presenting at conferences. In the previous video, we talked about getting our work accepted into conferences. And now let's imagine that we've already been accepted into the conference, and now we want to make sure that our presentation goes as smoothly and as professionally as possible. And along with that is getting across not just coming across as totally professional and having everything together, but also make sure that the message that we have for the audience is received as thoroughly and as informational and useful to them as possible. We want to make sure that they were there and that they gave their time to being present at the presentation that we gave, and we want it to be fruitful use of their time. And also to engage with us and our work and make sure that we make the most of our time as well. So we'll jump right into that. And I want to say that I know that sometimes it makes a lot of us really nervous. Everybody knows the sort of classic, who knows if it's actually true, but that people fear public speaking more than death itself on surveys and things like that. I don't know if that's actually true, but it is something that makes a lot of people really, really nervous. And I remember being really concerned with worried about making presentations and looking silly, but people aren't there to judge you or judge your style. They're there because they, looking at the program of the conference, they saw all the different options, they saw all the different talks that were happening, and they're there because they want to hear your ideas, to hear about the study that you're going to present, to hear about your pedagogical tools, the practice, your tips, whatever your field is. They want to know about what you're talking about. And so you should go into it with confidence. And that you want to, of course, respect their time, but you're there as an expert. You were chosen. You were, rated by the conference organizers or other raters, and your abstract was chosen. Your proposal was chosen. So you're there for a reason. And so make sure that you go into it with a confidence and you feel comfortable with yourself. Of course, we can't go in confident based on nothing. You need to, of course, prepare a lot for the talk. But don't go in all frantic and worried and nervous. Go into it as the professional that you are. Okay, so 10 tips for making a great presentation. This should be pretty brief. First of all, and part of some of these suggestions go along with the assumption that your presentation is only going to be 20 minutes. The typical academic conference presentation is 20 minutes plus either 5 or 10 minutes for discussion. That varies at some conferences, like TESOL conference, for example, or at ACTFL, the American Council on Teaching of Foreign Languages. Some talks there are actually 50 minutes with 10 minutes at the end for discussions. So those can be a little bit more workshop style. But I'll go off the assumption that most of us are giving 20-minute talks. And so if you only have 20 minutes is really little time to get much across. And so some of these suggestions are particularly pertaining to making the most of that time. And this first one is an example of that. So I would say not to give an outline unless the talk is unconventional, it's a plenary, or a job talk. And by that I mean a talk that you might give in an interview for a job. So if you only have 20 minutes, if you give one of those minutes to simply give in the outline, I think you're wasting that minute. Especially if that's the case if you're presenting an empirical study, and that study follows the traditional format of introduction, lit review, methods, results, discussion, right? Everybody knows it's going to follow that pattern or that format or outline, so there's no need to present an outline in your actual slides or presentation, because everybody knows that that's sort of standard structure for a paper or a presentation. So no need to do that to save time. Okay, you can give more time to talking about your actual study, which is why people are there. Another way to get to have more time to talking about your actual study, if it's an empirical study that you're presenting, is to get through the literature review relatively quickly. Again, if you're following that traditional format of intro, lit review, methods, result, discussion, which is the format that probably most of the time, everybody should follow if you're presenting an empirical study, you want to get through the lit review really quickly. I would say to aim for only 2 to 3 slides on a PowerPoint, 2 to 3 slides max for literature review. People are there, the people that are going to be there probably are familiar with some of the previous literature. They care about that topic. Again, they chose to be there and not at other talks that they could be attending, it's probably a topic that they're interested in, that they have some background knowledge on. So you don't want to spend a lot of time, if you only have 20 minutes again, you don't want to spend a lot of time presenting the background literature. You want to get to your study. So talk about your study, and the best way to get to your study quickly is to get through that literature. But you need to present some previous literature to make sure you contextualize your study, talk about what sort of previous research is informing your study, to situate it in a broader context, but then get onto it. You want to, because you're working in a audio and visual medium, not so much in a print medium, you want to show figures whenever possible. This slide isn't a good example, but you've probably seen, if you've watched some of these other lectures, that a lot of my other slides do include a lot of visuals, trying to take advantage of this visual medium instead of tables of data. We don't have too much in the way of tables. A slide that's full of numbers, a lot of people are just going to glaze over. They're not going to actually take that in. But if you can provide useful, colorful figures that present the data in a way that people can sort of take in the findings at a glance, that's going to be more effective in getting your message across. Also, in terms of style, make sure you don't want to have complete sentences in the slides, just bullets and phrases. And there's some situations where you might need more text. But in general, you want what you present in the slides to complement what you say or what the people are listening to. You don't want people to have to read slides thoroughly in addition to listening to what you're saying, because they can't do both really at the exact same time. If they're just bullets, it should be no paragraphing. Certainly, maybe occasionally an extended quote you'd present in paragraph form, but really just bullets and visuals as much as possible. You want to always practice your presentation with an audience, and it's not enough to just practice it on your own in front of the computer. You want to always do it in front of somebody. Okay. Also, in terms of presentation style, we're going to make sure that you're facing the audience. It's oftentimes the case that you may be presented here, facing the audience with a computer in front of you. The screen might be behind you, and that's fine. But what I see a lot of times at conferences is that people are looking at the actual screen, the presentation screen, the large screen, as opposed to looking at the computer screen. It's okay to look at the computer screen when you're giving an academic talk at a conference. That's perfectly okay. You want to look at the audience as much as possible, but I'd certainly rather see people looking at the screen and facing the audience as opposed to looking at the big screen and turning their back to the audience. I don't know why people do that. I see a lot, and I find it really distracting when people kind of turn their back to the audience and then look at the same screen that the audience is looking at. So always looking at the slides is fine, but always make sure that you're facing forward and facing the audience. I recommend always including slide numbers. So again, the typical presentation format is 20 minutes for presentation, 10 for discussion, or if there's an hour allotted to a talk, it's usually 45 or 50 minutes for the presentation, and then 15 or 10 minutes for additional discussion afterwards. You probably are only going to have, you may have 20 or 30 slides in a 20-minute talk. 20 is a good number to aim for. But even still, and you have that 10 minutes for discussion, one way to make that discussion portion of the presentation happen more efficiently is to put slide numbers in every slide. And that way, if somebody wanted to go back to a particular slide, they might be able to say, oh, can you go back to slide 17? I had a question about one of your figures. As opposed to, can you go back to that one slide with the results? And then you're sort of clicking through, wasting time trying to find the right slide. But if you have the slide numbers, keen conference attendees and participants will take note. If they have a question about a particular result or slide, they'll take note of which slide number the question pertains to. And then when it comes time for them to ask a question, they'll direct you back to that particular slide. So it happens a lot more efficiently. This is just another very, very minor suggestion in terms of saving time as well. It's not necessary to read the title, especially if there's a session chair, that somebody that introduces you. If they read the title of the presentation, no need to read it. But everybody's there because they chose to be there. They already saw the title of the presentation. The title slide was on the screen probably before you started, so there's no need to take the time to read the presentation. Again, and that's just a suggestion that'll help you save a little bit more time, so you have more time to then devote to the actual study, which is why everybody's there and why you're there to present in the first place. Last couple of suggestions. Last couple of suggestions. I know it's awfully tempting to choose really colorful or interesting and exciting. Spend lots of time choosing backgrounds for the slides. I've myself been tempted there as well. But my suggestion is just not to go with anything distracting. Go simple and professional, and that way you know that in the same way that you'd dress for a conference. Simple and professional, nothing that's going to draw too much attention away from the work. You want people to focus mostly on just the content of your message, not on the form or the colors or anything like that. So sometimes I see very flowery, or not necessarily flowery, but just sort of distracting PowerPoints, and I think that it takes away from the message that somebody's trying to get across. And then finally, I suggest that everybody, you give a presentation. This may be especially the case, even well, for a 20-minute or more hour-long presentations. Consider including a take-home message, just as something that everybody can walk out of the room with. If it's whatever it is, whatever you see, whatever you want to be the sort of bottom line to your paper. Because sometimes, as you guys know, if you've been watching these videos, I talk really fast, and sometimes some ideas can get lost. May not reach everybody exactly. That's probably my fault for being such a fast talker. But so consider at the end of the discussion of your presentation having some sort of take-home message for everybody, even if they might have missed some of the details along the way, so they can take away the main idea that you want them to take away from the discussion. Okay, that's it for this series of discussions and lectures on publishing and presenting in academic journals and conferences. That's it. There's no next up, but I'd love to have suggestions if anybody has suggestions for other things they'd like to talk about in terms of professional development. So thanks so much for being here, for whatever videos you're able to join me on. And if you have any comments or suggestions, I'd love to hear it. And so once again, thanks so much, everybody, and I'll see you around. Take care of yourselves.